This is a quick tutorial to show how to do a basic Orient Mesh alignment in our Geomagic for SolidWorks plugin. So as you can see, when you scan the part, it comes in the coordinate system of the scanner and not the coordinate system of SolidWorks. As you can see from the three planes, it's not aligned appropriately. So in order to do that, I'll go ahead and turn those off just to make it easier to see. Inside of the plugin tab, about halfway down, you'll see that we have some reference geometry tools, and these are a little bit different than the SolidWorks ones because these allow you to select scan data and fit the geometry to that. So I'm going to go ahead and do a three-plane type alignment here. So if I click on the reference plane option here, and I'm going to use the bottom as my first plane, and by default it uses the Smart Selection tool, which the Smart Selection tool will do like a flood fill with a curvature option. Now if you click and drag up and down, you can select more or less data, but for large flat areas, many times just clicking it will flood out to the first change in high curvature. So once I'm happy with that selection, I can hit OK, and we will create the SolidWorks plane from that geometry. Now if I come back into reference plane, if I want to use a manual selection, I can do that by clicking this option here. And the right click menu gives me the different types of selection tools. So many people like to use the lasso. So obviously it makes sense to use that same tool that I just used for this type of selection, but just for the sake of simplicity and showing different options here, I will select both of those areas, you see, and then I can create a plane there. Alright, so if I want to do the same thing over here, I can do the same thing and then maybe use the paintbrush. And you have to hold shift to add to selection here. And you see that I have that. Now if I want to do a plane in the other direction, I'll just go ahead and switch back to this method here. I'm just going to tell it to best fit all of those areas and create a plane. And then I'll do the same thing on this side. So the reason why I took that approach there is if I go ahead and grab these two planes and I come into the SolidWorks reference geometry tools, I can automatically just create a plane that's a mid-plane between the two. So as you can see right there, it made it really small. So if I come over to surfaces, which is where the mesh resides, you can see that it created that small little plane there. So I'm going to do the same thing in the opposite direction too. I'll select these two planes and I'll come over and it'll make a plane right in the middle. So you'll see that I have those two and then the bottom plane. So what I'm going to do is I'll take these two planes and I'll intersect them to make a vector, or you'll see it's just called a reference axis. So I created an axis from two planes, and then if I take that axis and the plane and intersect them and create a point, this is by far the best method for creating an alignment inside of our tool. So I have all the reference geometry created that I needed to, so I broke down those three planes into a point. Now if I come over to the Geomagic for SolidWorks section and I say I want to do an Orient Mesh, and then I select the geometry that I need to use. So if I select the point as my origin and then whatever I want to use as my z-axis or up axis. So if I want to use y up, I can use that bottom plane there as my y up. And then if I want to use one of those side planes, I'll go ahead and select one of those. So here. So I'll maybe use as my x-axis, we'll use this plane here. Now if I hit OK, what it'll do is it'll go ahead and move the part to that that coordinate system using those constructions. And all of the features do not move. They stay in their current location. But as you see, since I moved it to the world coordinate system, you'll see that those planes will now essentially take the place of all of these. So you could always get rid of these now because this does not follow the history-based or parametric feature, or I can actually just go ahead and collapse those inside of a folder if I wanted to. So that is a Orient Mesh inside of Geomagic for SolidWorks.